Good afternoon, everyone. I call this August 10th, 2023 Jacksonville Water and Sewer Advisory Committee meeting to order. I understand we do have a quorum. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda items? If so, are there any discussions? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to adopt the agenda.
I propose we adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda is adopted. Has everyone had a chance to review the last meeting's minutes? Are there any omissions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second. Wait. That's all right, you go first. Okay. Second.
All right, thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. All right, I believe now we're gonna go into the nominations of officers, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Wally Hanson now.
Good evening. We appreciate everybody being here. Sorry we weren't able to get together last month. We had several out of the country, which really put a damper on having a quorum. Every year at the first meeting after July 1st, we have to elect officers. The city code states that officers elected can serve 2 consecutive terms for the office that they hold, and then it has to rotate to somebody else. So Mr. Schiffelbaum is eligible as chair. Mr. Nickel, this is actually his second term as vice chair, so he would not be eligible to hold that position again. So it's up to the board how you would like to nominate. If you would like to nominate vice chair first and then do the chair separate, you can do that. Or if you want to do both at one time, that's acceptable also. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for nominations.
Okay. Are there any nominations for Mr. Vice?
I nominate Mr. Nicholas, sir.
And we can do that. I guess he would accept.
We can't say what.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well,
Need a
nominations on the
second?
floor.
I'll make a motion, we close nominations and accept by acclamation.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Do we have a motion?
But he did, so we just need a vote.
Do we need a second? Okay, we take a vote. All in favor of having Nicholas there, Mr. Sanders, as the Mr. Vice? All right. All right, motion carries. Congratulations.
I'll tell him later.
Again, I'll open the floor up for nominations for chairman.
I nominate you.
Second.
Thank you, I accept. All right, to accept the motion, who's got it? All right, we second it?
Yep.
Second, all right, motion is approved, and I'll stay here for another year. All right, okay, I'm sorry.
You just need to vote.
Okay, all in favor of me staying as chairman, please raise your hands, all right? All right, any seconds? Good, motion carries. This is not okay, we'll play this by ear. All right, anything else? All right, we'll leave, that's it, then nominations are closed, and we have a Mr. Vice, and I'll stay here for, congratulations.
Sorry, gentlemen. Ladies, sorry.
I'll fill you in afterwards.
Okay. In trouble.
A little sooner.
Yeah. Good.
All right, we'll continue with the briefing then, Mr. Wally, go ahead and take it over.
Appreciate it. Good evening. We actually had a citizen reach out to Mr. Schiffelbaum and ask questions and ask to revisit a discussion partially for their understanding, and it's a discussion we haven't had in a while, but this board had been very involved in early on. And really this dates back to pre-2009, but I think sometime around 2009 is when we had kind of the last discussion setting our water and sewer rates with our rate model and talking about the structure of those rates. And really the question came out to, the city has a base fee, and Sabrina is going to go over that in just a minute. We have a base fee, but it includes 2,000 gallons. And the question was, why? Because we have some seniors and small families that don't use that full 2,000 gallons, so they feel like, maybe there's another way that we can do that. And Sabrina's going to kind of discuss that with you. She'll go over kind of what came through in setting that. She'll show you what our rate structure looks like. She'll give you a comparison to ONWASA. And then we'll talk about why it is that way, and from a staff's perspective, why we would recommend that we stay that way. So for that, I will turn it over to Sabrina.
Okay. Good evening, thank you for having me. So as Wally said, I'm just gonna go over, I'm gonna start with a brief overview of the rate model and how it came to be. As Wally said, prior to 2009, at some point, there probably, I'm sure, was a rate study done, but 2009 is when we first contracted with Raftellus to complete an initial rate study and have a rate model created. Prior to that date, we did not have a rate model that we used as staff to set our water sewer rates. And the main goal of the contract was to develop a financial planning tool that we could use to determine where our rates should be, to meet the revenue requirements of the system, to allocate cost out to the different, fixed, variable, the different classes of customers, and just determine where our rates needed to be. At that time, I think we knew that we were not in a great position with our rates, but we weren't quite sure exactly where they needed to be. And then we used that same rate model all the way up until 2017, and that's when we contracted with Stantec, and that's the rate model that we currently use today. So as we create the rate model, we had several objectives. Revenue sufficiency. We've talked before about how Water and Sewer Fund is an enterprise fund, and it's supported completely through the user fees. So one of the main goals is to make sure that we have sufficient revenue to operate the system. Revenue stability, which means that you're limiting variances due to weather or usage, and that's part of, we'll talk more about it, but that's part of where that base rate comes in to play and make sure that you have revenue at times when people are not using water. And then rate stability, which would be having your rates stay level. Right now we have the current practice, not necessarily an adopted policy, but the practice of council to increase at a steady rate. And we wanted to be sure that we were avoiding situations where we didn't have a rate increase for several years and then all of a sudden, you have a 50% increase that really hurts people, which if you remember back then, we did have 2 huge back-to-back increases. And then affordability, we want our customers to be able to afford the services, and there are guidelines set.
I'm sorry, are you waiting for visitors? Because it's at 6 and y'all are here early.
What are you looking for?
Water and sewer?
This is it. Come on in.
Thank you. Hey, Randy.
So we'll talk a little bit more about those guidelines, but you do want to be sure that the rates are affordable. The customer equity and impacts, that would be recovering costs from different users in proportion to the use of the system. So right now in our rate structure, we don't have a separate rate for commercial customers, but one of the things that we do have, for example, is the surcharge on certain sewer customers. So that would be an example of that where a restaurant or a laundromat, where it costs more to treat that sewer, they're paying a rate that's covering that. And then we also wanted to address conservation. At the time, we had the opposite of what we had.
Sorry about that. Been cranking the whole time been in. Don't tell me something.
So right now, we have a rate structure that the more water that you use, the higher the rate is. And that's to encourage conservation. But at this time, when we first started, we actually had the opposite. We had a rate structure that the more you used, the less the rate was. So we wanted to address that. And then from the city's perspective, council and staff, the main three going into the first study were revenue sufficiency, revenue stability, and affordability. Those were the three highest areas of priority at the time. So the first thing is that we needed to identify what the requirements were of the system. You need to have enough, as I said, to run the system with the user fees. You need the proper funding for the daily operation and maintenance, but then also taking into account any development and growth, the CIP projects, and then the financial integrity, which, as you all have seen a couple of times, at least the rate model presentation that I come and do, we have all of the operating expenses, and then we have the CIP, but we also have that financial piece where we talk about our debt coverage ratios and our fund balance reserves. And this is where we get into the discussion a little bit, the fixed charges and the variable charges and what the differences are. With the fixed charges, that's the monthly base rate, or on the fee schedule, it's called a capacity charge. It does not change with the usage. It's the same for all of the customers based on that meter size. The fixed charges are set to recover the customer-related costs. So that would be the billing, the collections, the meter cost, some of the meter maintenance, and also set to include a recovery of a part of the capital cost. And other fixed costs is debt service. So those fixed fees cover the debt service as well. Oh, one more thing I wanted to add about the fixed charges. As we talk about the larger components and that stability, our fixed charges are about 64% of our water revenue and 73% of our sewer revenue. So we collect a little more revenue from the fixed charges than we do from the variable, which is good because we need to be sure that we have those fixed charges to cover all of our expenses. And then the consumption charges, those vary with the amount of water that you use, and they are set to recover costs that vary with usage patterns. So those would be the water production, the treatment, wastewater collection, treatment, disposal, all of that, anything that's going to increase costs as usage increased. That's what those charges are set to recover. And then some portion of the fixed cost as well. And then for the revenue there, we have 36% of our water revenue comes from the consumption charges and 27% of our sewer revenue. As I mentioned before, we do have an increasing block rate structure that is meant to promote conservation. And base charges promote revenue stability, but they can impact affordability. So what that means is that when you have your rate increases, you always increase the base charges, that's where your affordability starts to get impacted. However, right now our existing monthly bills for our average customers are comparable to other utilities. When we do the rate model, we don't typically show all the information, and I don't think that's a tab that we show, but we do look at the rates for other areas, and you have to be careful comparing because all of our systems are different and we have different debt and different ways that we treat and all of that. But we compare it to 8 other utilities, and we are the lowest for our average customer, which we consider to be 6,000 gallons a month. And then our existing annual bills for average customers are affordable as defined by the EPA. So the EPA gives us a guideline and says that the annual water bill should be less than 4.5% of the median household income. And for our average bill, based on 2021 salaries, we are about 2%. So we're doing really well there as far as being affordable, according to those guidelines. And when you talk about the minimum usage, the base, that customer that does use the 2,000 gallons or less, we're at 1% there.
So there is a difference between a person using 4,000 or 5,000 gallons versus the person only using 600 gallons.
Yes.
Significant.
Okay, again, we wanted to make sure that clarified, because obviously you got some folks, that's what led to this question was
Right.
that you've got these folks that use all the extreme amount of water, and then you got a regular person that just uses, minimal. So explaining what you're doing as far as, the cost rates is very important.
Yes, and I'm actually we're gonna get to a slide that kind of goes over the actual fee schedule, so.
Thank you.
So just, again, the rate model and how that works, we put in the operation and maintenance, all of our revenues, our budget, our CIP. It looks at our fund balance that we start, we put the fund balance that we're starting with, and then the rate increase, it calculates, we do the just-in-time rate increases where it shows what it would be if you, didn't have a rate increase only exactly when you needed it. I'll get to that slide too, but I think you guys remember that we override it with the 2.25% to kind of show where we will be at the end of that window. And that is our current practice that we've done for several years now, with the exception of the 1 year that we received some ARPA funding and we were able to skip a rate increase that year. And all of that work leads us to our rate schedule, or our fee schedule. And the very top line, the 5/8 inch meter, that is the meter size that most of our residential properties have. We do have a fair amount of customers that have a 3/4 inch meter, so their rate is a little bit higher. But you'll see the fixed rate is the 55.95 total, and it is broken down water and sewer. We do have some customers that are only water and some that are only sewer. And then the first 2,000 gallons of usage is included in that base rate. So 2,000 gallons and less, it's always going to be the 55.95 if you have a 5/8 inch meter. As you begin to use usage, you do start to incur some additional costs there. It's 85 cents per 100 gallons if you stay from 2 to 6,000. Most of our residential customers, the average is 6,000. So it's a large percentage of our customers. And then we do have some customers that are the 6,000 to 10,000 gallon range. And so that's gonna increase your bill a little bit more. Your rate's gonna be a little bit higher for that usage. And then of course we have not many residential customers, but a lot of commercial customers and multi-unit properties that get into those higher tiers.
So before you leave that, so the idea behind this is kind of, I think everybody's used to, you buy in bulk, right? So if you buy in bulk, you get a cheaper rate.
Right.
This is the exact opposite of that. So the more you use, the more you pay. So when you start getting into some of those, what she's called the volume above the 2,000, you actually pay more as you use more.
So, question, just out of curiosity, do the meter size, does that impact the 2,000 gallons? I mean, is a 6-inch meter still minimum 2,000? It's all the same.
Yeah, so the base rate for every meter, no matter size, is 2,000 gallons. Obviously, a 6-inch meter is gonna use up your 2,000 gallons a whole lot faster than a 5/8 meter. But I think we've only got like 1 or 2 6-inch meters, like the hospital, right? So, they're never gonna be in their 2,000 gallon,
Right.
so.
Yeah. And then, not to complicate things too much, but when we talk about the larger meters, if you do have like an apartment complex that does have a larger meter, but they're multi-unit, their billing is a little bit different. So they get the 5/8 inch rate per unit.
Yes.
So,
So if you have an apartment complex that has let's say you have a 24 unit building that has a 2-inch meter, they wouldn't be billed
The 2
to
inch.
the 2-inch. They would be billed 24 5/8 meter. So it's an equivalent residential unit.
and then they are allowed 24 times 2,000
Yes.
Right.
on the gallons as well. So
So any overages over that 2,000 is just absorbed by all
Well, you
residents?
could have a situation where you have a family living in one and they use a ton, and one person living in another that doesn't, and it could balance out on the total. But the way we've done it is that equivalent residential unit at 5/8. So all of our apartment complexes that are master metered are that way. Now, that said, council took a stance in 2007 or 8, I think, and said that, if we're going to talk about, if you remember that time period, there was a drought and there were water restrictions across the state, and Durham was actually counting the number of days that they had of water capacity, and council took a stand because we had a lot of apartment submittals, and so now all of our apartments are individually metered. So if it's a residential unit, it's individually metered.
and that's where the increasing block rate structure, that's where it came from, is to encourage conservation. Previously, yes, we had that, the more you use, the cheaper it was, and so did many other places in North Carolina, but now this is fairly common, and we want to be good stewards of our resources, so it's good, best practice to encourage conservation in this way. So I just wanted to do a comparison between the city rates and our WASA rates. This comes up quite a bit. As you can see, the top line is, again, the city's rate. We have the water base and the sewer base there. We include our 2,000 gallons of usage in that $54.95 that you pay each month. On WASA, their base rate is only $45.36 a month. However, there's no usage at all included in that. And if you were on the next line to use 1,000 gallons of usage, the bill goes to $57.32. So it is a little bit higher than our base rate, even with half of the usage. And then if you were to increase that to 2,000 to match ours, their base rate goes to, well, not base rate, but their bill goes to $65.29. So it's about $10 more for the same amount of usage.
So while we put this up there as a comparison, we have to remember that Wassa has a completely separate system than the city. In many cases, this includes water and sewer, so that might be comparable in, say, Richlands or Swansboro, but much of the county doesn't actually have sewer. And then some, like the neighborhood that Derek lives in, has private sewer. So they would pay an Wassa water rate, but a private sewer rate. So we put this up there as a comparison just so you could see, because they are adjacent to us and they have a different rate structure than we do. And many municipalities around have actually gone to a zero included in your base rate. There's only a few left and we're one of those that includes any gallons in the base rate. But we've always, it's worked well for us. We feel that it helps keep our bill reasonable. And again, to operate a system, anybody that's run a business knows you have fixed costs whether you have a customer coming in or not. So we have to cover those fixed costs. We have debt service payments, loan payments that we have to make. We have, breaks and repairs and parts and personnel and equipment. So we have things that we have to cover no matter the usage. So, but then we have things like treatment, chemicals, those things, pumping electricity. The more that we use, the more it costs us. So those are our variable rates. So, and then also, not to complicate things, but we actually, if a resident has a 3/4 inch meter and they would like to go to a 5/8, we will actually allow them to do that. I think it's a $50 swap out fee. So there's nothing, while we will, based on the American Waterworks Association standards, we'll tell somebody what the recommended meter size is based on industry standard, but we'll allow them to have a different meter size if they request it. So if we have somebody that's, has a 3/4 inch meter and they want a cheaper base rate, we'll allow them to swap it out to a 5/8.
Just give utility bill and a call.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do that pretty
Often?
regularly.
Oh, really?
I mean, a lot of times if a customer calls and they are complaining that their base rate is high, because it is significantly higher with the 3/4 inch meter,
Right.
that is something that we offer as an option to try to help them if they're interested in doing that. And it is $15 to switch, so you really get that back in a month,
Yeah.
That was 15?
15.
Oh, I'm
It's like,
sorry.
I think
I was
it's-
wrong.
I think
I thought it
it's
was 50.
I think it's $15.50 maybe, but it's very
cheap.
inexpensive and it's definitely worth it if you need to reduce that cost.
And in addition to that, we actually allow commercial to use a 5/8 also. So if you're in a small tenant space
Right.
and all you have is a bathroom, then you don't need a 3/4 inch
Right.
meter. So we'll actually allow commercial to go to a 5/8
So
also. So we're pretty flexible when it comes to allowing people to try to minimize their monthly bill.
Unless there's some sort of fire suppression system. I do want to add that on the commercial properties
Right.
because there is a requirement there,
Right.
I think, for the larger meter size. We've ran into that before.
Now, somebody switches and decides a month or so, made a mistake, want to go back, is it the same cost?
Yes, we'll let them go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a meter change out. We'll change it back, but they'll pay the meter change out fee. So, and that could happen. The city has 2 pressure zones. We have a high pressure zone and a low pressure zone. And if you're in, a low pressure zone with a 2-story house and you want to, run your dishwasher, your washing machine, and take a shower all at the same time, and you're on a low pressure, you might not want a 5/8 meter. You might not be happy with that. But if you're on a high pressure, it may not be an issue. So some of that is, we have had, I don't know that we've had anybody, I'm not aware of anybody that's gone back, but those are the type of things we kind of talk through with the customer before, just to make sure they're aware of what could happen.
Yeah. How do you find out that you're in a low or a high pressure?
We
area?
can
You just-
we can show, they just give us an address, we can tell them.
Okay.
But most of the time, the high pressure is typically, the Western Boulevard, up to Gum Branch Road. And then really where the apartments are at Williamsburg, Williamsburg Place Apartment.
Uh-huh.
So that apartment complex, facing it to the left is low, to the right is high. So if you're in that area, Northwoods is all in the low pressure, downtown's low pressure, and it deals with the tanks. So if it's served primarily off the Commons tank, then it's on the high side. If it's served off of one of, the Gum Branch tank or the Northwoods tank, those are in 17 downtown, those are all the low pressure. So it deals with the elevation of the tanks.
Gotcha.
And just so I don't get in trouble with utility billing, I want to be sure that I say that we're talking about going from a 3/4 inch meter down to a 5/8.
Yes.
So we're not, if you're trying to go from like a 2 inch meter down to a 5/8, that's gonna be a little bit different.
Right.
I'm not saying that we can't do that, but it's gonna be more than $15.50.
So it's extreme there,
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention about the gallons. It's interesting because like 10 years ago, I think everyone did include some usage in that base rate, but like Wally was saying that there's less of us doing that. And today when I looked at the comparison, it's just us and one other utility in the group that we compare ourselves to that have the usage included now. Everyone else has gone to 0. And then I just wanted to once again show everyone this is what we get to. This is our rate model panel. I know some of you have seen it in the past, but it just helps. It gives us options to put in overrides, to look and see what rate it's calculating. If we just let the rate model calculate the rates for us, we can put in different options. Like this one, you can see that we had 1.25 and 24 in the override line at the top, and then we let it calculate out. We put 2.25 the rest of the time and let it calculate at the end. And then it gives us a snapshot at the bottom of where our average bill will end up, which helps us with that affordability aspect, looking at the minimum bill for our customers. And then when we talk about the financial integrity, making sure that we have our fund balance at a certain target level, we don't want to drop too low. And so that's another area that we focus on when we're looking at our rates. I think that was it. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you all have.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, for me, that was, of course, it's always educational because a lot of the folks that we deal with out there, they don't know the details of where the money goes. All they know is that why is this bill more? But when you start breaking it down like you did, it kind of explains it. Okay, yes, we understand the base level, and then the more you use it, the more you pay and all that. But that should answer a lot of questions. I mean, it's all education. I appreciate that.
Well, I think one thing this year, especially, the rate increase combined with the recycling and the waste, it wasn't just water.
That's right.
Sanitation.
Multiple things went up, so we kind of catch it
All.
Yeah, that's right.
because that's,
Property
they
tax.
see the bill.
It's just
But I'm just talking about the monthly bill.
Right,
went
right.
up because of what recycle was.
Yeah, recycle and trash went out.
And then trash went up again.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I was actually gonna say that. So, one thing that we have to remember, we talked about water and sewer because that's what this group does.
Right.
When we mail out our bills every month, it's a utility bill. So it has water, sewer, trash, stormwater, and then if they had any, set asides or anything extra for, if you put, bulk pickup, something like that, or if they put out too much vegetation, there can be extra charges. So our utility bill has all of that. So it gets, sometimes we hear complaints when we increase sanitation or recycling, thinking that that's water and sewer. So people will take their utility bill and they'll look at it and I'll give you an example. Mine is just over $100, I think, on most months. But if you look at my water and sewer portion, I'm over the base rate, but I'm not real far in because then you tack on the $16 for trash service and $5 for stormwater, it starts adding up pretty quick.
Right.
So if you take somebody like Derek, I like using Derek as an example because we talk a lot about what he sees because he's just outside of the city and he's got water, sewer paid to different people, and then he's got trash paid to somebody else, and he'll tell you real quick that if it doesn't go in his can, it does not get picked up.
No.
So forget having to get rid of a couch or something like that. And then he's also got, there was another one you mentioned.
So we pay a water bill, the sewer bill, sanitation bill, there's no, stormwater.
Yeah, but you pay your HOA, which
Yes,
covers
yes.
stormwater.
Hmm.
So, because the HOA manages the stormwater.
Collectively, I'm paying significantly more for less service.
Mm-hmm.
So when I add those three together, and compare it to the services that the city provides, I'm getting, cheated.
But you're saving on property tax.
That's true, that is true.
But I'm
That's
also
true.
paying higher, insurance,
Yeah.
so
Fire
property
protection.
insurance.
Because fire
is
protection.
higher, yes.
Yeah.
So, those emergency services, the further away you are,
Yeah.
the higher premium you're gonna pay for your property taxes. So in town, I don't know what public safety boasts for response times, but insurance companies seem to like that quite a bit. So,
So you should move in the city then.
That's what I told them. I tell people every day, we get calls from all over because they think I've got a Jacksonville address. That means I live in Jacksonville, so they call us. And unfortunately, a lot of times we get calls for people that live in the county. I tell them, if you move into the city, I'll take care of you. But I can't do anything for you once you get outside the city.
I tried, at the time that, I was in the market to buy a home, and at the time, there was very slim pickings. I didn't need a 6-bedroom home, so-
Is that all?
There was a few years ago, if you guys remember, the real estate market was
On fire.
pretty tight,
Yeah.
so.
And I know it doesn't help ultimately, but we do try to phase in the rate increases some. The sanitation rates go into effect July 1st. So when those increase, those are on the July bills. And then the water and sewer rate increase doesn't show up until August. So you get to the same spot, but we're trying to ease you in a little bit. We do recognize that, we try to do what we can.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sabrina. Ms. Amy, I
Can I
think.
say one more thing?
Yes, sir.
But you touched on it, but, since I'm the old guy on the committee, I was during that process when the rates jumped up so high, like 30-some% one year, it was, if I remember correctly, but it jumped up real high and citizens went crazy. And I was one of them, by the way, but we all went crazy because it jumped up. That's where this model that you're using now really festered itself from, was so the citizens of Jacksonville didn't get bumped up with a 30% raise on their rates in 1 year. That hurts you worse than it does at 2%, which we all came up with collectively, as a panel, and it seems to be working pretty well. Even though some people may think 2%, well, that's better than 30% 5 years from now. And that's where all that came from. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it was two back to, you probably remember too, but it was
Yeah.
two double-digit increases
Yeah.
back to back that totaled like 50%.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was something.
That's exactly what it was. I worked in water billing at the time, so I remember it very well. Because we handled a lot of calls, but yeah, it was a lot, especially on those people that are at the base rate on the fixed incomes to have those giant increases. So we definitely want to avoid that.
And not long after that, we did the exact same thing on the development side with system development fees. And we literally went on system development fees, which is where somebody buys into the system, as they build houses or build apartments or build commercial. We went from $1,800, which it had been $1,800 since the 90s, and we jumped to like it was $5,800 or $6,100 or something. And the development community, we had a stakeholder committee. We brought out the development community because we knew it would be, something. And the one thing that they said was, just don't do it all at one time. They supported us. They recognized that we use that money to reinvest in the system and to, provide for additional capacity. But, still, I can't imagine what percentage that is, but it was significant.
All right, moving right along, Miss Amy. You're supervising chemist.
Yes, I'm supervising chemist for both the drinking water supply over at the water plant and then also over the lab at the wastewater facility over on Fire Tower Road.
May I just interrupt one moment? I want to say that I'm a senior citizen in Jacksonville. We use less than the 2,000 a month. Doesn't matter to me. The service I get from you all doesn't matter. Any question I have, I call and they respond quickly. I go by the guidelines that you all set up as to how much I can put on the street, when I can put it on the street, how I have to present it on the street. And they're always kind, respectful. So I have to applaud you all for that. Other than I'm a senior citizen and ouch, sometimes that hurts.
Amen.
Again, when you look at living in the county, I was a property manager for 20 years. And tenants would just go crazy because they didn't have what people have in the city. And I said, well, you chose to take that property in the county and and I did. I put my packet when they moved in and said, this is what you're going to combat in the county. Here are the companies that you can call for trash. Here's for recycling. Here's for this. This is where you take that to the dumps. And a lot back out before they rent and say, we're going to the city. But anyway, I applaud you guys.
No, we appreciate you coming and saying.
Thank you, and thank you for coming.
Okay.
I only have one thing to say. I love this. I wish you would put it in the newsletter so that all of us get this, because they're not gonna show up here like we did.
Yeah.
You know, they need the details. I run around with a lot of senior citizens. I'm about this close. Point at Randy. Shut up, Randy. But we do. I appreciate the city sanitation people. And when I called about this water or this bill, let me rephrase that since I've learned the difference. And they said, oh, it's for sanitation. And then you tell me tonight, we got a water one coming up next month. As a person who's on a fixed income, this does cause some budget changes. Not major at the moment, but I can foresee the future. When my water bill, utility bill is more than my phone bill, I get a little hyper. But I understand better. I just wish you guys would think about a tier for those of us who consistently use less than 1,500 gallons. Because we're conservationists by nature. This is what we grew up with. All of our parents were Depression era people. So think about that. I'm just asking that you consider it. And I don't have any complaints with this department whatsoever, and I'm thankful that y'all are here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
And Amy?
Yeah, so the water shortage response plan is a state required plan that we are required to update every 5 years, and it has to be approved by council every 5 years. The previous one was, I think, completed, submitted to the state 2018, but approved by council in 2019. So we're looking at this year for being able to have it go through again. What it does is it gives you the ability to declare a water shortage for your water supply system. It is, I'm trying to think of my, breathing.
That's all right, I'll jump in for a minute.
Yeah.
Because this followed, I think this went into effect in 12 or 13, but this followed that same shortage that we just referenced. And what it saw was that there were systems that could have done a better job of managing and preparing in advance of the shortage. So the state like they do, enacted a requirement for everybody across the state to implement a water shortage response plan. And at that time, we all followed very similar guidance, whether you were in the western part of the state or the eastern part of the state. And, you know, as you can hear right now, it's raining pretty good. Even when Durham was counting the number of days, our water system draws from deep wells. So we really didn't have the concerns in the eastern part of the state that the Piedmont and the western part of the state really had. So when we implemented this, there were specific triggers that are automatic. That means when it happens, you go to this next tier. And when we presented this to council originally, that first tier, which is basically we encourage conservation, became automatic. So we kind of stay in that first tier automatically. So we're always in the first tier of the water shortage response plan because we want to encourage conservation. And across, and we talk about this in the model, across the country, we've actually seen the water usage per person fall significantly. So we actually, when we run our model, those same calculations of usage, not just number of customers, but usage per customer goes into that factor. And sometimes we budget no usage growth. We may budget, additional customers, but when we look at usage, we don't actually budget a usage growth. So this kind of all follows that. And of course, if you think about historically why there's such a decline in water demand, it's because of all the energy efficient appliances now. I mean, who of us doesn't own an HE washer, right? Unless you've got one from like the 70s or 80s, maybe 90s, you've got an HE washer, uses less water, so it doesn't clean quite as good as the old ones, and it doesn't last as long, but we have energy efficient washing machines, we have energy efficient dishwashers. So all of those have contributed to the decline in water demand, which is a good thing because, it makes our supply more sustainable. So in our water response plan, we have basically 5 identified levels of response. So this gives you what our targets are, and you can see that 5% reduction, we kind of stay in that first level all the time. And again, that's kind of voluntary reductions. And then as you get into mandatory reductions, then you can see what those targets are. That's why you're going into that. Amy, is there anything you want to add to this slide?
No, the other slide though, just the note that what it does is it puts a requirement to be able to go into this, so there's no individual that can just declare the ability to step into this. So I mean, with each step, it's kind of just this happens and then you have to do this, which helps to, on the next screen really, that'll be the one that identifies it better, I think.
So this talks about our triggers for the water shortage response plan. When you see pumping time, percent of safe yield, that is our water supply. That is directly related to the water that we pump out of the ground using our wells. So if we reach 80% of the safe yield, let's skip down. If we reach 85 of the safe yield, we automatically trigger that next level. So these are really or circumstances. So the first is the pumping time the percentage of safe yield. The second, which is what I think would probably be more applicable to us, is basically the water usage percent over average usage in the previous year. So when we did our, so the water shortage response plan that we're under right now is, was approved in 2019. So if we hit 15% of above our average usage for last year for 5 consecutive days, so less than a week, we automatically have to fall into the next level. So if we hit 20%, we've got to go to level 3. And some of these, in going into the plan, some of these actually carry penalties associated with them. I mean, it gets into watering your lawn when you can water your lawn, when you can't wash your car, those kind of things. So these do carry weight and penalties. And some of those are required by the state. And then you can see, so we evaluated this, and one of the things that we looked at, while it's not very likely that you would have 5 consecutive days at 15% above your average usage, which I think was it 4.3 or something?
Yeah.
Something, so let's say it was 4. I know it's generally right in that vicinity. So let's say it's 4.3 million gallons a day. So that's 430,000 gallons more than that for an average of 5 days. Well, if you get a really hot July over 4th of July week, it's conceivable that you could use that much over 5 consecutive days. Or what happens if you have, I think that everybody's aware that there's a VA hospital looking. What happens if you have one major user that comes online? This is an automatic trigger. So if you had a 300,000 gallon, well, I guess technically a 400,000 gallon a day user come online, so one manufacturing facility come online, it automatically triggers a water shortage response plan. So some of that we are, we're kind of looking at, and we've gone back historically, we've never triggered any of these since the plan this was originally required in 12 or 13. So we're actually proposing with the update to increase that slightly, because we do know that we have potentially some higher water usage customers that we are going after. I mean, recently you've seen the presentations with economic development, the city council, and encouraging that. The city has projects at New Frontier Way, which is over near our water plant, and we're doing stormwater improvements with the hope to recruit some sort of, job creating facility in there. And while we don't know what that is, I've answered multiple questions about what the water system and the sewer system can handle demand-wise. And in some cases, some past that original 10 and 15% of the average daily use. So that is that's our primary change proposed for this water shortage response plan. And if you go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On that? So that model you just put on the last slide, so the water usage over 5 consecutive days, never mind, I saw years. I read years, not days. So I was wondering if, looking at it, is there built in, I know you said like VA coming on, just normal growth in the city itself, is it built on that at all?
Not really, that's not how the plan's written.
So how do you
It's
account for
demand.
more water usage in this model then? Because it's got to be more.
And I think the idea behind it is you have growth, but as you add growth, your average grows, right? So the likelihood that you would add one single user that is 15% is not likely. But
So it's
what
not
I'm
based-
saying is, in some of the questions I've answered in the recent past, it could be likely. So,
So it's not really based on how much you're pumping out daily now, based on, say, 5 years now, and you pump it out more, you kinda lost me on that one.
so the pumping is actually on the left side. So all of our wells have a specific capacity.
Right.
So it's if you get over that safe yield capacity, which we have more wells than we don't have to run every well every day. What we have is well combinations. So today we may run 3 or 4 wells, and tomorrow we'll run 3 or 4 different wells because there are rest times required for those wells. It's when you get into running over that becomes the problem. So that's just pumping. It's when so what we're talking about is demand on the system. So when I'm not concerned about that first column unless something happens. I'm just not concerned about that first column because we have enough wells that we can add and rotate. The likelihood of us getting to, with the permitted capacity we have to get to like 95%, I think we'd have to be running every well every day. It's almost not possible. But when you get to the demand piece, so that's people demanding usage in the system. That's the piece that we're talking about. You take last year's average, which is, let's just say 4.3 million. I think that's pretty close. So if last year's average is 4.3, and I can do 10% easy, so 10% of that's 430,000 gallons. So if you have 5 consecutive days that exceed that 10%, you automatically enter that water restriction. And while it's not much for level 1 or level 2, Amy, if you'll flip to the next slide. So look at the different levels. So as you get into the different levels, there's actually violations and monetary associated, and if you get caught doing it more than once, we'll actually cut your service off. So, and this happened in other parts of the country during the water restrictions.
I understand what you're saying, where it doesn't really account for population growth
No,
or
it
anything
doesn't.
like that. I think that this is more in an immediate situation.
I understand
You know,
that.
and I think it's just this
Yeah.
doesn't address
I
that.
understand, but Wally lost me when he was talking.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Wally, but it seemed like, how do you anticipate future requirements for water if you're not calculating it here as well, is where I'm getting confused. But listen to you, based on what I heard you say, you're not concerned with that because we have the capacity now to support, let's say, temporary future, 10
Yes.
years or whatever, without adding new wells.
Yes.
That's where I was trying to lead to.
We do have that in place. Every year also with the state, you're required to submit your numbers and whatnot for the local water supply plan. And with that, it's kind of goes hand in hand with this. But with that one, it looks at the next 50 years population growth and estimates that out. And if in 30 years you're exceeding, say, 60% of what you have, that's when the state's kind of trying to get you to, hey, look for more options, look for other things. We're fortunate enough where we do have extra supply, so we don't hit that mark every time. But every year that does get looked at.
Yeah, so this is emergency response, kind of, not planning. This isn't a planning document. This is a response document that's required.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know what our percentage is? You said if it's 80, this happens, if it's 85?
No, but
That's a normal.
the good thing is we have 2 aquifers,
Right.
so it gets a little more cumbersome to calculate that out. I'm sure John was here; he could probably quote it for me. But when you look at just the plant, I want to say we've got enough wells. Do you know what our permitted capacity is off the top of your head?
It's different now for Black Creek and the other one. I want to say it's without the reduction. I think Black Creek would be in the 4.8 million. I wanna say the whole thing is more around 7 or 8 million combined.
Yeah, so,
We're at 60 or 55, something like that.
yeah,
Yeah, we're
well, I don't-
usually
I don't-
less than half, I think, of
Oh.
what.
Yes. If you figure the wells that we have for the water treatment plant and what we have in the Black Creek's 1 MGD, so that's our permitted capacity. So it's whatever that total is for 365 days, so 360
Yeah, healthy water bank.
million.
Black.
Yeah,
Right,
plus we
which-
have a water bank because we
Right.
stored water. And then, or it's like a checking account on paper, so we have paper permitted stored water, if that makes sense.
It's still an aquifer.
So, yeah, that's right. We could pump it out if we needed to. And then we have, we have 20 wells in the Castle Hayne, and they range from 250 gallons a minute to 400 gallons a minute to 1,200 gallons a minute. So, you're really talking, I think we're somewhere around 6 or 7 million gallons that we could send to the water treatment plant right now in permitted capacity. So, and we're 4.3, right? And that doesn't even include the Black Creek. So I want to say we're somewhere around that 7-8 million mark total. So yes, we're running 50%, give or take.
Thank you.
So by upping those percentages on the right-hand side, you're kind of relaxing.
Right. We are relaxing. That's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to, based on what we've seen in the past, what we've talked to the development community about, and I think this document kind of has some of that natural growth built into it because it uses last year's average. So as you go through the year, you're constantly adding, additional development in, or the thought is so your average goes up each year a little bit. So it's kind of built in, but you could have one major user when you have, it's not like we're using 8 million gallons a day. So you could have one major user that could do that.
And then our next steps for this, you can review the draft on the City of Jacksonville website. It opened, I believe, July 12th, I want to say, and it's supposed to close August 16th, I believe. And we plan to put it through for council approval on September 5th, and we would like your support in doing that.
Of course, if we get any public comment, and we
Yeah,
haven't
well-
received any yet, but if we do receive any public comment on the plan that's concerning, we'll bring that back to you if we need to.
Okay, then I'll make a motion that this committee supports their plan to council.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor? All right, opposed? All right, so moved.
Mr. TJ.
Hello again, committee, and thanks for having us. Tonight I wanted to speak a little bit about the Ellis Lift Station rehab that we've had going on for quite a while now. As you all know, that station at the Ellis Boulevard, we have bad flooding in that area during heavy flow, heavy storms. We've had problems getting to some of our equipment, as well as some of the same equipment being submerged during these heavy floods. So what we've done is we've gone through and replaced the biofilter, the bypass pumps, and the generator. All of the equipment has been moved to higher grounds to prevent damage from these floods. And of course, we've got security fencing installed to protect from theft and vandalism. There's a lot of little kids in the area who like to see, when they see these big stations, it looks like a playground. And If I were a kid, I would be out there playing as well. But they put up some pretty tall fencing over there, and what our plan is to do is put up some beautification along the roadside so that it doesn't look like a, fortress or a plant in a residential area. Try to bring up the enhancement of the lift station. So the biofilter has been upsized to 25,600 CFM, which our last one was considerably smaller than that. And the reason why we had to upsize is because, like I said, we moved everything to higher ground. That came with distance. So as to where our last unit was closer to the building in the flood zone, but we didn't have to have such a large unit because it was closer to the building. So we had to compensate for the distance. And that came in at just shy of $85,000 for the biofilter. And then for the generator, we upsized to a 200 kW generator, which is oversized for the pumps that we have in the station right now. But we went with this size so that in the rare occurrence of needing all 3 pumps at one time, or them coming on across the line, or not ramping up but coming on instantaneous, that we had enough voltage to pull all 3 pumps at one time if need be. And that came in at $116,000. Very good investment because, once again, like I said, our past units got submerged and there was damage. We did everything that we could every time that it happened, but it was just so much wear and tear from the location of where it was designed to be previously. And then for the bypass pump, we have a maximum GPM of 8,800. We have it set to 4,700 GPM for the simple reason we don't want to overcome the force main that it pumps to. If we were to turn it up any higher than 4,700 GPM, we'd have problems downstream. We would have to enlarge our force main as well as the gravity lines that our force mains feed into. So we have the ability of pumping more than 4,700 GPM. Hopefully we'll never have to, but if we do at that time, I'm sure, or prior to that, we'll probably look into upsizing the force main. And I think that we're already in the process of considering extending the force main now. So that may help with us being able to turn up the bypass pumps if need be. And that came in at $103,000. And it was, compared to our mobile units, it's considerably more costly, but these are stationary. So, and also at higher elevation, so we don't have to pull a pump to that area when we have a bad storm, worry about putting them up on trailers to keep them out of the water. They're on permanent fixtures well away from the pump station.
How much higher are they? You know that?
Yes, sir. It's about, it's about, let's see here. So you can see there, I would say that's about 3 foot at the highest spot. But the big difference is how far it is from the station. So it may only be 2.5, 3 feet here on this picture on the concrete slab, but that concrete slab is up a hill that's about, I would say, 12 to 14 feet. So in addition to that slab, you know, we're well out of the flood zone.
How far is it from the station now?
Go back,
It's-
your pictures showed the station in the background. Isn't that the station behind it?
Negative. Yes, sir. So, so you can see the station, the white part. Yeah, so, you can see the building in the background there. I would say with the elevation change, altogether, I would say about 45 to 55 feet as to where we used to have those units right at the building. Because we would even run some of the plumbing for the bypass pumps as well as the conduits for the generators right into the building, right along the side of the building. So we were close. But like I said, this helps being that we're so far, and once we landed where we were gonna put them permanently, that slab is elevated.
So before you leave that, when we started looking at this project originally, I went back and looked at, I know you've seen me throw that picture of Ellis pump station flooded up to the, midway of the door or so. When it flooded like that, I went back to the pictures, the elevation of the land, not including the pad, did not flood at that. The water was just about level with the top of where land elevation was at this point. It was trees. I don't know if you remember, but it was we ended up having to take out, unfortunately, a pretty good row of trees.
Right.
But that area wasn't flooded during Florence. The water was up to it, but it wasn't completely flooded. So, but what we did use was the flood elevations from the model, the FEMA model. And we did that because this project had FEMA funding. I think we had 670,000, give or take, from FEMA, from Hurricane Florence to do this. And of course, the costs that TJ gave you are for the units themselves. That doesn't include any of the electrical costs, concrete costs, those kind of things. So we had, but it was nice to have FEMA funding to help support this project.
So I'm not sure if you can see it in this slide. It's at the bottom left corner. That is one of the wet wells that we had to install in conjunction to this project.
This right here.
So what happens is we've got float bulbs located in that wet well. Once the level gets so high, it'll trigger the bypass pump to run. And it takes about 30 seconds to a minute to prime up. Now, mind you, this is a large pipe as well as it's far. So it only takes about 30 seconds to a minute to prime up. And once it does, it'll hold that level or pump it down until the off bulb falls. And it'll just keep repeating cycles as need be.
So where's it pumping to?
And to the force main. So the same place that the station itself would pump it. The only difference is now the bypass pump, which is out away from the station, has taken over. So it's doing the same job that those 3 pumps inside of the station were doing. Pumping into the same force main that I was telling you about that we're looking at possibly extending one day.
So the design behind this, the philosophy behind this was to make the station more resilient. What we do is when we have a predicted storm or something that we would expect flooding associated with, we can actually lock the station down. It's waterproof, we waterproof the station, and it can operate. And the idea is you want the station operating normally as long as possible. If we lose commercial power, then the generator just kicks on. But if we have a named storm, we actually have the option of shutting the station down completely so that we don't have damage and running the bypass pump completely. So our people would never, if it flooded, our people would never have to get to the pumps. They never have to get to anything. They can come to this pad to check everything. So the idea is that we actually have a redundancy and power loss with the generator, but you know, if it were to flood and we don't want to have to worry about that, we can completely shut it down. And the bypass pump is diesel driven, so we just have to have diesel.
So basically, like Wally said, this is a station away from the station.
Yes.
That bypass pump alone will exceed the GPM of what our 3 pumps inside of the lift station can pump at one time together in unison. The 1 pump will exceed. So, like he said, everything can be ran from higher ground and not have to worry about getting in a canoe or John boat, which we have had to do in the past several times.
We used to keep one here.
Right, just for that. And actually at our division right now, we have one. Prior to a bad storm, we load it up on a truck and get it ready, or either stage it in that area somewhere, because we know that in order to access the building, we'll have to get in that John boat.
And as you can imagine, while this is an expensive solution, even though we did have assistance, a workers' comp claim from something happening in a John boat is much more significant.
Yeah.
So, and FEMA actually loved this design. They thought it was a fairly creative solution to a challenge that we have.
Any questions on the Ellis?
Thank you.
So the other thing that I wanted to touch base with you on tonight is I don't know if you've seen on Highway 24 near Lejeune Boulevard and the Montfort Point, all of the construction and bypass pumping that has been going on over there. So as your significant event states, on the 6th of July, we had an SSO in that area, right under the overpass.
SSO stands for
sanitary sewer overflow. And it was caused by H2S gases compromising the inside of our concrete pipes.
H2S?
H2S gases are
sulfide.
hydrogen sulfide. And what happened was, above the flow line is where the gases are present. So because of the weight difference. So from about the 9 o'clock to a 3 o'clock position inside of this 24-inch pipe, it has been deteriorated because of the gases. Subsequently, the ceiling rings or gaskets have fallen, and when they fell into the flow line, what you see here is a ceiling gasket that has large, so it's still attached at that point that Wally just circled, as well as the lower point. And what it has done was caught all of the debris that has come by. And that's at about every joint of pipe. So during heavy flow, like with the heavy rain you just heard, with I&I coming in or high usage, these gaskets with the debris on them are forming somewhat of a roadblock, or building a dam, or it's holding the flow back. So that
Looks
is
like locks in a canal.
So where that green
It's
dot
almost
is,
like baffles. Excuse
where
me.
the green dot is that the second?
Yep,
gasket
this
that's
is
on?
another one right here. It sure is.
Yes. So,
So
and
like
that's
every
it.
30 feet, you've got room.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
less than that, it's like 8.
Exactly, in every joint, the gaskets have fallen somewhat in that same form and fashion. And that's because of the gases that have deteriorated and compromised the concrete. You can see at the top of the pipe at 12 o'clock, the reinforcement coming through and showing. That's
wire.
rebar. That's the rebar that's in the middle of a concrete pipe.
Oh.
All right, once you can see this rebar structure, you have lost half of your pipe already. As well as in the first circle that Wally put up, you can see this wall starting to fall in.
Just above it, right? Kind of
Yes.
right in there.
So right there is starting to fall in.
ESPN.
So that was the cause of the SSO that we had on July 6th.
Wow.
So this is some of the debris that has been removed from those gaskets. So we hired a company to come in and cut the gaskets, remove the debris, as well as line the segments that were that had the most issues in it. We plan to move on and do the others as well. But some of this material weighed between 20 and 50 pounds per gasket. So you can imagine in a 24-inch pipe with heavy flow at full pipe, with that hanging in the middle is holding back all the flow. It had to relieve somewhere, and it relieved at that point.
Pressure point.
Yeah, exactly.
Average flow for this pipe, this actually comes from Ellis Lift Station.
Right.
Ellis is what feeds this pipe. It averages 900,000 gallons a day.
And that's it. That's
not in wet
usually,
conditions.
right.
That's average.
So here I had them place the bottles next to the debris just to show you in reference of size. You know, and that's a lot of debris hanging down at any one joint.
Can you vent that?
Vent.
So the gases can escape? Or is that
No.
illegal or troublesome?
They have air. We do have air releases
I know some
that
systems have
is
it.
for
right.
that. But you know, in this case, it just boils down to over time. I mean, I think this was constructed in the 70s, so you have 70s construction. I think this station was built in 78, maybe. So you have 70s construction, concrete pipe, hydrogen sulfide gas, and there's so much flow through there that it's almost impossible to do anything, which is why you can see the bypass that they've set up, and you really don't want to know what that bypass is costing us.
So to touch on your question, we do have vent stacks on the Sonic side. Okay, you know Sonic is right across the street. So this line feeds to our main pump station. We have elevated manholes along that area. And those elevated manholes, some of them do have the vent stacks on them. But it's hard to put those without building another manhole in the middle of a segment.
Yeah.
So here what we've got is the crew has assembled over 1,200 feet of bypass pipe. That is the longest bypass to date for the city of Jacksonville employees to assemble. So we tip our hats to these gentlemen and ladies. They've done a wonderful job at getting everything and making sure that there are no leaks. If you can imagine assembling 1,200 feet of pipe and not having any drips at these joints, you know, that's a pretty big feat. So in order to do this, they had to make confined entries, and here you have some staff members making a confined entry to install a pneumatic plug. That's how we bypass the line. So we put the plug in the downstream side. Now that manhole becomes a wet well. So we pump out of that wet well, out of that manhole, 1,200 feet away and discharge.
So if you want a field trip, we can set it up for you.
So it's, I mean, the pipe looks like it's about 12 inches,
I
so it's
know.
doing the
It's
job
much
of,
smaller.
but it was gravity fed.
Yeah, so it's
Underneath.
gravity here.
Now it's force.
It's
Right.
force, that's right. And it's temporary, so they turn it off every night, so it's not like it just stays. So they only use it when they're working. The longest they left it was 2 or 3 days for the
Right.
liner to cure.
Yes. So, and like he said, those 2 or 3 days we had crews, of course, we split the shifts up, but we had crews working continuously around the clock. And they were there to monitor the pressure in the plug, make sure that there were no leaks, make sure that the work zone stayed set up, because you still have some people that'll come by and hit cones, not purposefully, but it happens. So that was their main duties while being on the site, was checking the work zone and the pressure in the plugs and for leaks. So all of that led up to this process here, which is lining of the pipe. So once we got all those gaskets cut out and the debris removed, we had a company come in and line that compromised pipe. So what the liner is, if you're not familiar, it's like a fiberglass sock that goes through the line, and it's pushed in using water pressure. So it's being filled up from the top of that lift with that large hose, and it's forming water. It's putting water in there and it's forming pressure, and it's actually inverting the sock, what we call a sock, but it's inverting it and presses against the walls and adheres to it and cures. And that forms basically a new pipe inside of a pipe. So we don't have to worry about this rebar anymore, because there's actually a liner in the whole circumference of that pipe. Our next plans or phase will be to do the same thing to the other segments that are upstream and downstream of this segment, as well as visit the possibility that we spoke about earlier, is elongating the force main that dumps into this, and possibly doing away with this whole segment. But we had to do something now to prevent future SSOs, sanitary sewer overflows.
What was the volume of the overflow? Was it?
It was estimated at 1,700 gallons.
So not
And it
tremendous.
wasn't bad, but that was the second one. So of course, we don't wanna keep reporting that we've had a problem in this same area. So we are doing all that we can right now to take care of the issue so that it doesn't happen anymore. As well as we've ordered an alarm system for the manhole that does overflow due to these issues. It's the same manhole because of the height of it. We've purchased an alarm that will call a SCADA phone. The person on duty will get an alarm saying, hey, this manhole, the water level is rising. It'll give them enough time to get there, check it, possibly turn Ellis lift station down so that it's not pumping so forcefully through this gravity main. So we're doing what we can to prevent another spill. Any other questions on that?
I think we've covered quite a bit. Very educational. And as you were talking, explaining this, which is, I'm thinking of these two ladies that just came here, and wealth of knowledge. It clears up a lot of things that as cost effective as that may be with that sock that you're doing,
Right.
making another pipe within a pipe, I'm sure that saves a lot of money there for everyone, so. Again, we appreciate you doing this and briefing us along with the other two ladies. Again, that's what these boards are good for, and as you can see by the citizens, they do listen and then they learn. That's our main objective here. All right, in saying that, do we have any other open discussions or anything that we need to cover that we have not covered, any safe rounds?
I just wanted to mention that one of the longtime contributors, water sewer member Carmen Aragona passed away this
Oh, I know.
past Sunday,
I didn't know that.
and unexpectedly, and just want to recognize his service. I mean, he had a lot more knowledge than any of us as he was in the business, and I don't remember how many years it was, probably 20,
I think he was 25 or something.
25
on this
years he
board.
was on the board.
Wow.
And so he, you know, it's a loss for the community, loss for his family, and just wanted to recognize
Oh,
that.
thank you for that. That's
Unfortunately, that.
And he was in my office on Thursday,
Oh, gosh.
so it was very unexpected.
Yeah, we have some awesome people out there that have done some great things for the city and for the county, and you know, the generation's getting older, so we want to make sure we remember them, and just like we do everything else, it's very important that we continue to thank you for that. Any other discussions or anything everyone wants to talk about? All right, our next, in closing, our next meeting is gonna be on 5:30 PM Thursday, September 14th, 2023. And if there's no other business, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second? All right, so moved. Stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all did a great